Hey everyone, I am Ashley Banfield, and I am reporting directly on this investigation from Elbow Cay in the Bahamas.
Right now, I am standing at the Abaco Inn, a critical location in the mysterious disappearance of Brian and Lynette Hooker.
Since this was the absolute last place anyone saw the couple, before everything went horribly wrong out there. I will unpack those details for you in just a moment. But there is major news today. I just learned that Brian Hooker has actually fled the Bahamas, which is hardly surprising. I did not expect it to happen this quickly, especially since Brian himself insisted he would stay to search for Lynette and even extend his travel visa. That never happened, though I suppose anyone might make promises before spending several grueling nights locked inside a cold jail cell. He made those bold claims before the police locked him up and interrogated him. Investigators lacked enough probable cause, which is why they had to release him Monday night at 8 o'clock. Tuesday came and went, and now it is Wednesday at 7 p.m.
And around 1 o'clock this afternoon, Brian boarded a flight heading straight to Atlanta.
He claimed to detectives that he was simply visiting his mother. I know he was stopped at the airport, and please excuse the background noise and wind while I film. There is a busy restaurant nearby, as I try to show you the best possible angle of the Abaco Inn. But United States Customs and Border Protection did flag him at the Nassau airport before ultimately letting him fly out. He is gone. And he clearly secured an emergency passport, since he previously claimed both of their travel documents drowned with her in her bag. Curiously, that waterproof bag has never been recovered. And neither has Lynette. Today, I am retracing the exact path they took after leaving the Abaco Inn. We will follow their timeline and reveal another strange event that took place along the way. Because this inn was not their first stop that afternoon. They had spent hours further down the quay at the Firefly Inn. I will show you where they were hanging out around 11 o'clock that morning. They only arrived here around 4 in the afternoon to swim in the pool. I am going to walk you through the entire sequence. But since it is so windy, let us take a look at our investigation today. Welcome back. We are on day 2 of our search here in the Bahamas. Today, we are piece by piece reconstructing the final days anyone ever saw Lynette Hooker here alive. Right now, I am standing outside the Abaco Inn, just up there. We are stationed on Elbow Cay, directly across the water from Marsh Harbor. Let's trace the exact steps Lynette and Brian took right after they checked out. Our team has uncovered crucial new details about their timeline. Initial reports suggested they spent the entire day drinking heavily on Elbow Cay. But we now know this was actually their second stop. Their second location that day. They actually spent most of the morning further north, staying at a resort known as the Firefly. Yes, the Firefly Resort. So, earlier that morning, their luxury yacht, Soulmate, was anchored just down the shore. So they pulled up anchor and brought the boat up here. They dropped anchor right where I showed you earlier. We will head out there shortly, and then they took their tender in to spend a couple of hours. Now, from what I have gathered, they only arrived at this spot
Here at the Abaco Inn, around 4 in the afternoon.
That is precisely when their first round of drinks was ordered. But they did not drink heavily here. The staff here cannot say if they drank elsewhere first, but they only ordered 2 rounds of Bacardi Light and sodas. Just 2 Bacardi Lights and sodas each. That first drink was around 4, the second closer to 6 or 7, and they had cleared out of here by 7:30. We already knew that part, right? Instead, they hung out up by the pool, which means they must have docked their dinghy right here. Let me map out the layout of this place for you. I am standing on a boat currently tied to the jetty, okay? You climb up these ladders, walk down the dock, and make your way up to the inn. Now, the discovery of Lynette's watch is where things get truly interesting. I have managed to confirm that she did own an Apple Watch, and yes, they found it. Rumors claimed the device was found on a beach, which made me wonder if it washed up here near the Abaco Inn. Just look at that stunning beach.
It is beautiful.
And that scenario would actually make sense, right?
But no, that is not where her Apple Watch turned up.
As it turns out, Brian handed the Apple Watch over to investigators directly from their yacht, Soulmate.
Because of that, I doubt the Apple Watch data will offer much help.
If we believe Brian's story, she never actually made it back to the Soulmate. She never returned to the Soulmate, which means she probably was not wearing it when she vanished.
But I want to show you this channel because they navigated through here in their small dinghy. Notice how calm and still it is. It is an incredibly sheltered, protected area.
I will explain what is completely exposed out there in just a moment.
But they originally entered right through the mouth of this channel, okay? When they departed, they would have headed this way, turning south toward the open water. Their actual anchorage, their yacht, was moored just outside this narrow channel, not very far away. Traveling in a tiny dinghy that only goes 2 to 4 miles an hour.
That trip would take roughly 10 minutes, okay?
So,
they departed around 7:30 and rounded that bend, and I will take you out there in just a moment. But first, I wanted to show you their exact surroundings here at the Abaco Inn, where they spent their final hours.
all right, let us reconstruct what they would have done. They would have pulled in right here and secured their boat to these ladders. On Saturday, April 4th, when they visited, or on any crowded Saturday during the peak season. And we are currently in peak season. There would be 8 to 10 other dinghies just like Brian and Lynette's because people love to gather here.
It is a popular spot.
I mean, look at this place.
I will address those heavy winds in just a moment because the Atlantic sits directly on the other side, making it incredibly breezy.
We are standing on an extremely narrow strip of Elbow Cay,
right at the tightest bottleneck of the island.
There is barely enough room for the inn and the pool here, while the far side is hit by brutal winds.
meaning you would never attempt to launch a small dinghy on that rough side of the island. It would be an absolute struggle
To even secure a boat over there.
But right here, sheltered from the wind, the water is calm, quiet, and perfectly still.
It is an easy place to anchor.
That is why boaters anchor here. Even during heavy gusts, these waters remain safe and steady. Now, you might hear the heavy rush of the wind picking up on my microphone. That is actually part of this mystery. The wind plays a massive role here.
There are major contradictions about the wind conditions Brian claimed were blowing at 7:30 p.m. on
Saturday, April 4th, the night Lynette vanished.
He reported 20 to 25 knots.
But locals who were out on the water that very same evening tell a completely different story.
18 knots max. Even an 18-knot breeze, while noticeable, feels like nothing when you are sheltered on this side of the island. Right here in the shadow of Elbow Cay, we are completely protected from those elements.
The wind is howling over there. You can see the palm trees bending fiercely because the open Atlantic lies just past that building. The brutal force of the ocean waves and wild winds are trapped entirely on the eastern side.
But down here on the shore, just look how calm it is.
The water is barely moving. Hopefully, the camera captures just how tranquil this spot is. Even with a light breeze today, the harbor remains incredibly peaceful.
I am recording this at 12 p.m. on Wednesday, April 15th.
Now, as I mentioned, boaters usually bring their dinghies straight to this dock, securing them to the wooden pilings before climbing these ladders. Do you see that center console boat anchored out there? Hopefully it is visible. My lens cannot zoom in any closer, but try to spot that small center console boat.
Just keep your eyes on it.
Right now, it is sitting there all alone, but usually you would find 8 to 10 similar vessels here.
They pull in bow first and drop their stern anchors behind them.
Securing the stern allows them to pack dozens of vessels side by side during busy Saturday peak hours. Rush hour. A lively time when local sailors, tourists, and yacht crews flock to the popular Abaco Inn to relax and enjoy the island atmosphere.
Many of them gather around the pool.
Living on a sailboat means constant exposure to salt water and ocean spray.
So, swimming in a freshwater pool is an absolute luxury.
That is also why they secured a private mooring ball over at Marsh Harbor.
In yesterday's update, I shared a detailed tour of exactly where the vessel's soulmate is currently tied up.
I circled right around it,
showing how it sits isolated in the harbor, looking completely abandoned.
No one is living aboard as far as we know, but investigators have been conducting thorough, daily searches of the vessel.
That is confirmed. We actually spotted police officers leaving the scene yesterday afternoon.
There are a few other critical details I noticed.
Out here, which I will point out once we reach the shore, because local authorities have just arrived.
The Coast Guard is on scene. Those are United States Coast Guard investigators, and they are searching private driveways, heading down to the shoreline, hunting for any trace they can find of Lynette or her
personal belongings, searching for anything that points to what might have happened to her.
Now, from what I gather, today is actually the very first time Coast Guard K-9 units have arrived at the Abaco Inn to search with their tracking dogs. Ever since this nightmare unfolded, Brian has been, as expected,
questioned and let go, yet the hunt continues. Right now, the local bartender is the sole witness who can describe Brian.
He never saw Lynette.
But we do know she was reportedly wearing a black swimsuit.
I am still trying to verify where that detail originated, because honestly, it is still unclear.
She stayed by the pool, which is why the bartender missed her.
While Brian walked up to the bar alone to grab their drinks. Interestingly, Brian was completely shirtless at the time.
Staff members say he actually offered an apology.
He apologized for his appearance.
Or his messy appearance, since dinner hour was approaching, and he was coming in to grab late drinks without a proper shirt on. He was wearing only swim trunks. So, it is highly possible they were both just in their swimsuits, riding in the dinghy, enjoying some relaxing, casual drinks, swimming, and having fun. Perhaps Lynette was wearing nothing but her swimsuit and a light cover-up when she vanished. So I am going to step out of this boat right now, climb up that ladder, and walk up to the property so you can see exactly what the Abaco Inn looks like and visualize the actual steps they would have taken. I want to walk directly in. The footsteps of Brian and Lynette. Warby Parker is honestly one of those services where once you try it, you seriously wonder why shopping for glasses used to be such a massive headache. For years, your only options seemed to be incredibly expensive designer frames or incredibly ugly, outdated styles. And look, with wedding season, summer barbecues, and endless photos coming up, your eyewear is going to be on full display. Which is exactly why I am totally obsessed with Warby Parker. Their virtual try-on tool is amazing. You literally just use your phone screen to see exactly how each pair looks on your face before ordering. And you can test out as many styles as you like. Let me show you mine. They arrived in this super cute little box. Check these out. These are the Harris frames with green polarized lenses, and I absolutely love them. They sit perfectly on my face, and even when I move around or slide them up on my head, they never snag in my hair. They will not blow away on the water. So, thanks, Warby Parker. I adore these. Plus, they offer sunglasses, contacts, quick online eye exams, and have over 300 physical locations across the country. Their high-quality prescription glasses start at only $95, making it the ideal time to refresh your look for spring. Buy a single prescription pair and score 20% off any extra prescription pairs at warbyparker.com/Banfield. Get 20% off at warbyparker.com/Banfield. Or simply tap the link in the description. Now, walk with me as we disembark. And by the way, I am ready. A boat just tied up at this pier, showing you that I'm standing right at this dock. They arrived in a small dinghy, meaning they had to climb their way up. Using these wooden ladders, walking up the dock just as I am now. On the surface, it looks absolutely peaceful. An inviting spot where anyone would want to stop and linger.
Notice how calm the air is here. The breeze is gentle, and there is barely any movement.
Yet those distant palms are swaying, suggesting a completely different story on the other side. The wind is entirely different on that opposite side. Out there lies the open Atlantic Ocean, while behind me is the sheltered Sea of Abaco. It is quiet and protected, an ideal harbor for yachts, which explains why so many vessels anchor here.
Boaters drop anchor or tie up specifically because these waters are so safe and calm.
This is the lee side of the island, naturally shielded. With the wind blowing in, the island acts as a shield, blocking the harsh gusts coming off the rough Atlantic.
To understand the difference, let me show you what the conditions are like over there.
The sheer violence of the wind and waves is unbelievable.
No one would dare go boating in any vessel there,
especially not close to the shore. But looking closer at our surroundings, I noticed a camera mounted right up there.
Investigators established that active cameras are positioned
throughout the entire property, and the business owners have already cooperated with the police. They handed over extensive surveillance footage, capturing nearly every angle.
There are feeds covering the pool,
the outdoor bar, and the very docks we just walked down. That was our starting point. There is even another dock visible just over there.
Virtually every key location is covered by a lens.
I must apologize in advance if the audio gets windy. Bear with me, because we are now entering the highly exposed, windy zone of the island. We are crossing this road now, making our way toward the far end. This is the exact route Brian and Lynette took after securing their dinghy, walking directly toward the pool area, right past the bar. You will immediately notice the wind picking up as we cross this small hill and face the open Atlantic. A few other visitors are scattered around the area, just relaxing and enjoying the afternoon. It is currently 4 o'clock, warm but pleasant. We have reached the bar now, a popular spot. In fact, I just ate lunch at that restaurant, overlooking the tranquil waters of the Abaco Sea. But looking at the bar, this is where he ordered those final 2 drinks.
Specifically, 2 Bacardi Light rum and sodas.
One for himself, one for Lynette, before carrying them over toward the pool. That detail was confirmed by a staff member I interviewed. They eventually returned for another round, though their entire visit lasted only about 2 hours. That is key. Now, let us cross over to the opposite shoreline. Beautiful, but look at those powerful ocean waves. But it is incredibly windy and rough out there. You would not risk a dinghy in this. So, that is why Elbow Cay has 2 completely different sides. This is the rough Atlantic. But the protected leeward side remains calm. Right here, where you can easily drop anchor in a dinghy, step ashore for lunch, spend a day at the pool, or enjoy a few drinks. That is the setup. Let me take you down there right now. But first, we need to go back and trace a few key details.
What struck me as incredibly strange was my initial assumption that
they had spent the entire afternoon drinking at this bar. Yet we still do not know if they were heavily intoxicated, or if any tension or arguments had broken out. The daytime crew had not shifted to the evening staff, and the bartender on duty back on the 4th is not working tonight.
Up to this point, nothing in the witness statements suggests any unusual behavior.
They seemed entirely average, blending in so well they barely drew any attention. So only the bartender actually remembers seeing them there.
Now, this is the exposed windward side of Elbow Cay.
I am standing by the pool where Brian and Lynette spent a few hours drinking cocktails.
And you can easily see how windy it is.
I have to stand close to the microphone so you can hear me. Just look. This is the windward side of Elbow Cay. But their boat was not anchored here. It was moored on the opposite side. The wind is incredibly loud, but this is the exact pool where they ordered drinks. Let me walk you up toward the outdoor bar where Brian ordered their first 2 rum and sodas. Let us head up this way. Apologies for the wind, But this is the exact route he would have taken to
Walk up.
It is a beautiful spot.
It is easy to see why visitors linger here, especially given how peaceful the opposite side is. It offers a perfectly safe harbor.
The contrast is stunning. Look at how calm the water is here. This is where we anchored. Calm waters on the protected leeward side.
A complete contrast to that wild, open ocean side.
So, he walked along this path, heading directly to this counter to order their drinks at the bar.
He ordered 2 rum and sodas, Bacardi Light specifically, followed later by a second round.
The first around 4, and the next close to 7.
7:30 p.m., right before they wrapped up to leave, and he made an apology.
He walked up shirtless in his swim trunks and apologized, noting he knew they were getting close to the dinner hour. So, they appeared to be on a simple day trip, wearing swimwear and enjoying their time in the Bahamas. That is the scene. This is where they likely placed their order, or where he ordered those rum and sodas, before carrying them back to the pool area.
Just look at how calm and peaceful the water is behind me.
Incredibly calm. An ideal spot to anchor, especially if you are in a dinghy. It is calm here, but we are heading out so you can see the difference.
Right now, I am standing at the Abaco Inn.
Royal Bahamian Police and Defense Force vessels are currently stationed right here. And they seem to be linking up with the American investigators who just arrived. They brought search dogs and have been conducting active search operations.
They are out of sight on the private property, where the search is underway.
But it looks like they are preparing to be picked up. Either way, these teams have been searching daily since Lynette vanished without a trace.
They are scanning Elbow Cay and investigating Marsh Harbor, where his
luxury yacht, Soulmate, remains moored. Lynette and Brian actually began their day here on Elbow Cay at the Firefly Resort. It is another incredibly popular spot for people to gather. Many vessels drop anchor out there. Just look at this view. You can see several boats anchored in the shallows. Then they make their way directly to the shore. This is where they spent time around 11 in the morning on Saturday the 4th. Right there at the Firefly. I initially assumed they spent the entire day at the Abaco Inn, but they were only there for a few hours. Later on that afternoon, and around 4 o'clock, they returned to the Firefly, where their day actually began. That is the only solid lead I have gathered so far, confirming where they were before moving on. Let me show you this really quickly. The distance is incredibly short. Right there is the Firefly. There is Elbow Cay, and the next spot is barely a quarter of a mile down. Honestly, it is less than a quarter mile.
Now, I am navigating out of the narrow channel by the Abaco Inn. Let me turn around so you can get a clear view.
We are moving out of that small channel now.
This is likely the exact path they would have traveled.
We have to navigate down this way, but since we are in a larger boat, we must stick to deep water. We are forced to stay deep, but they could have easily cut right across.
When you are piloting a smaller vessel, you always take the most direct route.
There is no need to worry about deep channels like the bigger yachts do. So they likely headed out that way. The time right now is 4:15. Quite a few other boaters are passing by. It is currently 4:15 in the afternoon, and it is remarkably calm. Let's step up on the seats to get a better view here. Right. But down here, coming out of this very channel, this is the route they would have taken in their dinghy, and they had to steer around these shallow reefs right here, right? You can clearly see them. Then head down Elbow Cay toward where the yacht was moored. So, as we make our way from back there, near the Abaco Inn, I want to share a few critical details with you. But first, take a look at this stunning vessel heading right toward us. Unbelievable. There is some serious lifestyle out here, you guys. Just look at that yacht. Hello, gorgeous. Fishermen. Well, look at that. Now, out here in the Sea of Abaco, the water is incredibly shallow, far more than I ever realized.
Even at high tide, it is only about 15 feet deep in these crystal clear waters.
Believe it or not, my local law enforcement sources tell me the search teams actually deployed high-tech sonar, drones,
And specialized aircraft to scour the entire stretch of water where Brian claims he drifted.
So, looking down that way, I am pointing right toward it now.
That is Elbow Cay stretching out, and they had moored right where those massive yachts are anchored.
You can just make out the tall masts of those sailboats. Hopefully you can see that on camera, because we are heading down there.
Now, Brian claims he drifted all the way across, somehow bypassing that large landmass right over there called Lubbers, right?
And somehow landing far across the bay at Marsh Harbor. That is a massive distance.
Keep in mind, this entire stretch is the Sea of Abaco, and it is rarely deeper than 15 feet.
So, search and rescue teams heavily blanketed this entire zone with massive resources.
And my inside sources tell me one thing very clearly.
There is absolutely no way her body is floating out here. The active theory now is that she is somewhere on land. And if this is a homicide, meaning Brian Hooker is lying to investigators,
And he did something terrible to her.
detectives believe he would have moved her to dry land to dispose of the body, rather than the Sea of Abaco, where everything is completely visible.
You would spot anything in this water.
It is practically like a giant swimming pool. That is why the search teams and specialized cadaver dogs,
Along with the Royal Bahamian Police and their local Coast Guard, whose vessels we saw in yesterday's episode, and those teams,
those groups. The Royal Bahamian Police, working alongside U.S. Coast Guard investigators, are reportedly now shifting their focus to a land search using those cadaver dogs. Here is what is wild, and I had no idea. These specialized dogs can actually detect human remains up to 30 feet underwater.
I know. I did not believe it either.
It is mind-blowing. A trained cadaver dog can actually detect human remains 30 feet underwater.
right now investigators are scanning the water using that specialized canine.
It is fascinating to break down the science behind this. The forensics involved are highly complex. As a body decomposes, without getting too graphic here, microscopic oils release from the body and slowly drift to the surface. The sensory capability of these search dogs is truly remarkable. Over at the Abaco Inn, we spotted a handler wearing a shirt with a canine unit logo. It was a clear sign of what was happening. An American team had brought in a highly trained forensic search dog.
No. Let us trace the path where this investigation takes a strange turn.
This is the exact route Lynette and Brian Hooker would have traveled.
Their boat would have rounded that distant point, right near those white sand piles. You can still see those distinct mounds of white sand.
They navigated past that bend and headed straight down this stretch.
But look closely at the water. Notice how incredibly shallow it is?
It is unreal.
The window reflections are blocking the view, so let us step outside. It is very windy, but you need to see this firsthand. Because the entire theory makes sense once you get a closer look. Stay with me. Look at the depth. You can clearly see the sandy floor the entire way. Only now are we entering slightly deeper water. Even so, the ocean floor remains visible almost everywhere.
It is fascinating. Look down there.
Just pale sand beneath us, dotted with dark patches of reef. That gives you a real sense of the shallow depth here. Let us step back inside before the heavy wind completely drowns out the audio. Now, this explains why search and rescue teams had such a straightforward job scanning the Sea of Abaco. Local authorities do not believe for a second that there is a body hidden anywhere in this water. While it seems expansive from the shore, it is actually a very confined area. Just look at the layout. It resembles a massive saltwater lake, completely enclosed and highly visible. You can spot several catamarans and sailboats anchored nearby. Most of them are moored just off that shoreline.
And is this area called Pat's? Let me check. Yes, Aunt Pat's.
Aunt Pat's Bay. Do you see where that massive white retaining wall stands?
That marks Aunt Pat's Bay. So where is the public dock?
The witness mentioned that the public pier was located right next to Aunt Pat's Bay.
Meaning it has to be one of these two wooden docks right over there, sitting right beside that white wall.
These two piers flanking the white wall are the heart of Aunt Pat's Bay.
This is exactly where Lynette and Brian anchored their vessel.
This is the exact location. And I have this on direct authority because I actually spoke with the person who boarded that boat with him right after everything went down.
So, my source got on board the Soulmate with Brian the very next morning, and this is exactly where they ended up.
Look at how close we are to the shore. And remember, the wind is absolutely howling on the other side of this island. It is rough on the Atlantic side, but we are sitting on the protected leeward side right now.
You can see it is nowhere near as wild on this side, right?
How many knots are we registering?
What are the wind knots showing right now, Aiden? It looks like it is blowing at about 13.
Yes, ma'am. And on the night of the incident, it was blowing around 18.
Right, so this is what 13 knots looks like when the wind is blowing.
The wind is blowing this way. But on Saturday night, it was blowing that way. And if you look over there, you can see the nearest land.
Apologies, we have got some salt spray on the window.
The closest piece of land to us is Lubbers, and then off in that direction,
more than 4 miles away is Marsh Harbor, where Brian claims he drifted.
So, if he is drifting across, he either washes straight up on Lubbers or he completely misses it and floats all the way to Marsh Harbor. I have heard two conflicting stories. Some say it is impossible he missed Lubbers,
while others think it is highly possible he bypassed the island and drifted entirely to Marsh Harbor.
But ask yourself, why not just swim to the shore?
The narrative claims she fell overboard into rough waters, but she was known to be a very capable swimmer.
Look, I do not know the exact distance they were from the land, but the contact who boarded estimated it was under 1,000 yards.
That is about 10 football fields. Almost anyone could swim that.
She was an athletic swimmer, and he is a trained Marine.
And there is another detail here that absolutely does not sit right with me.
I have since uncovered that there were 2 life jackets
inside the dinghy, along with an oar that was completely intact.
Yet, he texted his friends claiming that his oar was broken. Sure, this might just be wordplay. One oar was missing, and perhaps the mounting bracket had snapped.
But there was still a fully functional paddle inside that dinghy, alongside 2 life jackets.
So, you have to ask yourself, why did Brian not put on one of those life jackets, grab the second one,
and dive in to swim?
Especially when you consider he is a Marine, right?
And he is an experienced mariner. 2 completely different skills.
He is a United States Marine Corps veteran, but also a skilled sailor who understands boating safety and knows exactly how to deploy an anchor.
We are in 15 feet of water here.
Just drop the anchor.
He already confessed that he did it too late. But why? There were 2 life jackets and a working anchor right there. Toss it over.
Grab the other life jacket, strap it on, jump in, and save Lynette. None of that happened, and he claims he last saw her swimming back toward the boat.
Right. He claimed it was roughly 1,000 yards to swim back to shore. To swim to the yacht, you see. The whole story just sounds highly suspicious.
But there is another fascinating detail from a contact on the search team.
With winds blowing at 18 knots,
paddling that specific little dinghy against the wind would be nearly impossible. The search team described the lightweight dinghy as acting almost like a massive sail. It would easily be swept up by the heavy gusts and pushed relentlessly off course. But wouldn't he have drifted into Lubbers Cay? Could the wind really carry him that far out? Well, I uncovered another crucial detail about that. The rescue team plotted a drift cone starting from the exact spot where he was moored. They mapped a wide V-shaped path, tracing the outer limits of where the winds could carry him. That entire cone represented every possible area where he might have washed ashore. So yes, landing on the northernmost tip of Lubbers Cay was definitely a possibility.
But then again, it is far more likely he drifted right past Lubbers, floating all the way to Marsh Harbor, a distance of over 4 miles. Still, Lubbers remained inside that drift cone. Once again, we have a few competing theories.
He is a Marine, yet he never dropped anchor.
He did not wear a life vest, nor did he grab the spare to swim out and rescue her. He claimed one of his oars was broken, but investigators found no such thing. A perfectly intact oar was lying in the bottom of the boat when they recovered it, along with those 2 life jackets and a flare gun. He did mention firing it at one point. Indeed, a spent flare gun was found inside the waterlogged dinghy when it eventually washed ashore at Marsh Harbor.
It all feels deeply unsettling. It just does not add up.
My contact on the search and rescue team confirmed the same thing. You could fight with all your strength, but those winds would still drag you out to sea.
Without a doubt.
But it begs the question, why on earth would you not dive in and swim? Any reasonable person would have tried to swim. Yet there is another terrifying element to this investigation, and it involves sharks.
Just south of Elbow Cay,
There is an area known as Toulouse, and right nearby lies Marnies. That stretch of water is notorious for heavy shark activity. Near Marnies, around 5:30, which would have been just an hour later, local fishing boats typically return to dock. They attract a massive gathering of predators to the shallows. Bull sharks, tiger sharks. Could a shark attack explain what happened to Lynette? We absolutely cannot rule out that possibility. Especially since 5:30 is just 2 hours before Brian claims she fell overboard around 7:30, extremely close to Marnies and Toulouse. There is another key location investigators might target with a cadaver dog, right over here, sitting just to the left of those white buildings. That is the exact spot where the Abaco Inn stands. But this other route is where they likely traveled in a dinghy, cutting just slightly north of the spot where he claims he was anchored. A dense stretch of mangroves lies right behind there. Apologies for the rough water footage. I wanted to map out these thick mangroves hidden behind the shore. There is a strong probability
That search teams will deploy cadaver dogs deep into that brush.
because, again, if the active theory holds that Brian harmed Lynette, investigators believe he would have moved her on shore, instead of leaving her exposed in the highly visible Sea of Abaco. The water is too shallow. This is exactly where detectives would likely focus their search behind those rocks. Deep inside those thick mangroves, there stands the Abaco Inn, with the entrance marked by those white buildings. This is the path the dinghy likely traveled. Right here is the spot where they were anchored.
And this is where search teams might focus later.
Behind those jagged rocks, thick patches of mangroves offer a hidden space they want to sweep with the cadaver dogs. I know the footage is a bit rough and noisy out on this water, but that is the reality of filming on a larger vessel. That is Aunt Pat's right there. They were anchored just off that point, maybe 1,000 yards out. Here is another key reference point. We are now directly across from Elbow Cay, which lies right back here, having just navigated across this stretch of the Sea of Abaco. Let me show you once more how incredibly shallow these waters are. It is so shallow you see the bottom clearly. This strip of land is known as Lubbers Quarters, and some locals argue there is simply no way his boat could have cleared it. They insist he could not have navigated past it. Others argue it is possible, but I want to show you the heavy police activity over there. Law enforcement has arrived, likely the same search crew I spotted earlier. They are focusing on this area because of how isolated it is. If the theory is indeed that Brian committed a crime and hid Lynette on this island, a trained cadaver dog could easily trace her. Again, apologies for the heavy wind, but take a look at that visual reference point behind us. Notice that large white roof and structure? That is Aunt Pat's property.
We are heading straight across the channel toward Lubbers Quarters.
That is the island known as Lubbers Quarters, where those police vessels are currently moored. You can see the law enforcement boats stationed right at the dock. At this point, I think I will head inside the cabin to escape this wind.
I suspect they are scanning the shoreline, likely using the tracking dogs.
Right.
We have just spotted some of the search teams. Give me 1 second.
All right, we have the search teams in sight. It is incredibly windy. Apologies if you cannot hear me.
Just a few guys stationed over there.
I asked around earlier, and many of these searchers are not locals.
They are American specialists. As for the locals, of course, the local Bahamian police have their boats.
Our captain is struggling to hold our position against these gusts.
It is incredibly tough. They are bringing the human remains detection dog back from the shoreline,
Getting it back on board the Bahamian police force vessels.
I am watching closely to see if they deploy specialized gear or retrieve items from the site.
But the wind is far stronger here because we lost the shelter of Elbow Cay.
You see, without that barrier, we are completely exposed to the heavy Atlantic gusts, making it rougher.
Even so,
I want to show you the scale of these ocean swells.
actually, they are not too severe on this side, that is certain.
Our boat is steady. We are absolutely not tossing. I am wondering if the task force is about to pack up and depart, or if they plan to offload gear from that vessel.
Conduct a deeper investigation if they detected any scent clues,
If they spotted anything, or if something was triggered.
If so, you would expect them to immediately start hauling heavier equipment off the vessel
And heading straight back to the spot where they noticed something suspicious.
or where the detection dog may have picked up a scent and alerted.
Just over there, that is the area they were watching near the Abaco Inn. Exactly. They navigated out of this channel and positioned themselves right around where that anchor icon is shown.
They are approaching Aunt Pat's public beach right now. Okay.
If the missing person drifted with the current, he likely would have landed right here on Lubbers Cay.
And this is where the search operation is focused right now.
But notice the water depth across this entire channel. It is extremely shallow.
We're talking barely 4 or 5 feet deep.
Maybe 8 or 9. These depth recordings are at high tide. Wait, sorry, at mean low water, meaning average?
Mean low water, correct.
So, during the absolute peak high tide, how much water would we actually have in here?
Yeah, just a rough estimate. Add 2.5 feet, so 10 to 12 feet total. 10 or 11, yeah.
And this was the exact tide level when the incident occurred.
Just about a foot or 2 above that mark. So the theory contradicts what Brian was telling investigators.
No. He drifted all the way from that spot, floating across open water until he finally hit Marsh Harbor, 4 miles away.
Right now, they are finally pulling away.
Did you manage to spot anything?
Could you make out any details? Any luck?
I can't spot them. Try and see if you can.
They are shaking their heads. They are signaling no. But honestly, they do not owe me any answers. They are official investigators. These guys are with the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and they deployed 2 of their rigid inflatable patrol boats. These vessels are perfect because they can navigate almost anywhere. But they are packing up, and I have doubts. In fact, I am quite certain that if they discovered anything, they would not just leave like this. We would likely see a much bigger operation. So for now, absolutely nothing. Now we are gaining speed because we need to head straight out from Lubbers right there.
We are leaving that spot, steering away from Lubbers.
Our goal is to cross directly over to Marsh Harbor. It is a pretty long stretch, roughly 4 miles wide. Right now, we are retracing the exact same route that Brian claimed he took.
He drifted for hours,
insisting that he floated straight across the treacherous Sea of Abaco, landing at a spot known as Calcutta on Marsh Harbor. It is a rugged lagoon stretching about 50 yards. He claimed he washed ashore there, then had to struggle through brutal, dense undergrowth just to locate some help.
That is exactly where his dinghy was found.
Right there at the Marsh Harbor boatyard.
We are crossing over right now. Let me show you what it looks like out here. It is a massive distance. Thankfully, the waters are relatively calm, at least for today.
Looking out, you can see how vast 4 miles of drifting really is. But the core mystery remains, leaving many people highly skeptical. Would that trip really take 9 hours?
No. Our captain actually swam it in 2.
Do you believe those natural products you buy come from small, wholesome family businesses?
Not even close. Most are owned by massive conglomerates and private equity firms that take over the brands, filling them with cheap corporate filler. But one business is rejecting that trend, the Van Man Company.
They launched the grass-fed tallow movement years ago with pure moisturizers, and they have dominated the market with incredibly clean, near-edible products.
Tallow is effective because its fatty acids are nearly identical
to our skin's natural oils, meaning our bodies easily recognize and absorb it.
It easily replaces your daily lotion,
your night cream, wrinkle cream, even Neosporin or simple diaper balm. It is powerful enough to restore your skin, yet so safe you can spread it on toast. Real ingredients. Ready to ditch those toxic corporate chemicals? Just head to vanman.shop/Banfield and use my code Banfield for 15% off your first order. Once again, that is vanman.shop/Banfield.
Use my code Banfield for 15% off your first purchase, or just find the link down in the description below.
Van Man, real ingredients, absolutely no exceptions.
We are cruising at 19 knots.
And it should take us around 10 minutes to cross the Sea of Abaco, heading over to
Marsh Harbor, specifically to the exact spot where he landed.
Calcutta.
But honestly, 10 minutes at 19 knots in a vessel this size? I am still struggling to believe it took 9 whole hours in a screaming wind, especially since Brian said the gale was howling at 25 knots, and that is why they got separated.
Now, a wind that strong would surely push a small dinghy much faster than 9 hours.
It just feels like a hard... Well, it is a tough pill to swallow when you look at the facts.
We have made our way from across Elbow Cay, way over there, and I am standing right at Calcutta Marsh Harbor, where Brian's dinghy washed ashore.
And it drifted ashore right in there. See, right there? Here is how it lines up with the boat harbor.
So he drifts right into that spot.
While the main boat harbor sits right over here. He told investigators that he scrambled through all of that thick brush,
dense thickets and sharp rock, finally making it right in there.
If I can point,
basically right there is where he claims his boat ended up. And as it turns out, that is exactly where it was.
That is not just his version of events.
It is the absolute truth, because they recovered the dinghy right there, and a boatyard employee spotted him wandering. I will bring the camera forward so you can see. There is quite a bit of salt spray, so the visibility is not ideal.
But the boatyard over there had a night watchman.
Someone who found him walking.
So he walked,
I would estimate at least 1,000 yards.
Maybe 1,500 yards, navigating those jagged rocks to get from where he landed to safety. When investigators recovered the dinghy, it still contained 2 life jackets.
Interesting. They also found a spent flare gun and a single unbroken oar.
It was not snapped in half like a broken paddle, which is what I had pictured. It was fully intact. Perhaps it simply slipped loose from the mounting hinge on the boat.
Meaning one oar fell away and was lost to the sea.
As far as I know, they never recovered that second oar. That does not mean it is gone forever, but it has not been reported. But we know they recovered the first one. Because of that oar. Was sitting at the bottom of the dinghy and ended up back on Soulmate later.
And I now know that the dinghy is in evidence.
We certainly didn't spot it on board Soulmate when we saw her drifting in Marsh Harbor. The dinghy was reportedly removed from here sometime after the morning of the 5th,
right?
The moment he washes up on shore on the morning of the 5th.
That small dinghy was suddenly taken from this spot.
Search and rescue teams brought Brian and his dinghy back to Soulmate over on Elbow Cay.
The winds would be brutal here. Yet he somehow managed to hoist that heavy dinghy back up
Onto the stern of Soulmate, navigate her all the way across the rough sea of Abaco back to Marsh Harbor, and secure her right back to his mooring ball.
So, essentially, the trajectory of that dinghy begins with a pleasant afternoon at the Abaco Inn, heading out the channel. Then, according to Brian, some disaster suddenly occurs.
Within moments, he finds himself drifting all the way across the water to right there,
making landfall at Calcutta, incredibly close to the boatyard.
Eventually, the police arrive at 4:35 a.m. and they initiate their search. Somehow, that same dinghy is recovered and returned to Soulmate, along with Brian.
The dinghy is back on Soulmate.
Brian navigates Soulmate all the way back across. Let me show you.
Sailing all the way from that point, clear across to Marsh Harbor, slipping around the bend and right into his mooring spot.
That had to be one hell of a night, believe me.
A brutal night by any definition, because the vessel did land there. The real question is, what happened before that landing?
How long was that boat actually crossing the Sea of Abaco? How long was he truly adrift without any way to save himself?
Because he actually had a complete oar.
It wasn't snapped. It was an intact paddle-style oar that he easily could have used.
But the winds are fierce here, especially once you leave the protective shelter of
the lee of Elbow Cay, right?
Either way, this is a massive mystery.
So there it is. We are continuing our work here at Elbow Cay in the Bahamas. We traveled from Marsh Harbor, about 4 miles out, and we are going to keep investigating. I'll be speaking with Search and Rescue shortly.
Since the local volunteer fire department handled the rescue operation that morning, and I am uncovering far more about those critical hours, specifically Brian's actual demeanor, the statements he made, and the exact items that did and did not turn up in his dinghy.
Because they secured that dinghy,
As you saw, over on the other side at Marsh Harbor, but key details simply don't match up. Yet, fascinatingly, some of it actually does. Thank you so much for following this case.
This is a highly unorthodox podcast because I'm working without my usual equipment.
I am constantly on the move, boating from island to island to chase down this story, interview key witnesses, and uncover every single truth I can.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching.
And remember, the truth is never just serious, it's drop-dead serious.